This is Shelley Neese, managing editor of the Jerusalem Connection. In my house, 8 months out of the year, we don't have cable. We have enough subscriptions to political magazines and enough Elmo DVDs that we don't really need cable. Except for football season. Every August, my husband calls the cable company and signs up for the ultimate sports package, so we won't have to miss even the most minor game with his LSU Tigers. Cut him, and he bleeds purple and gold. For the last month, all I've heard him talk about is LSU's defense. In my sleep, I can hear him say, "Defense wins championships." And although true, we all know that even with the best defense, it takes a good offense to put some points on the board. What does this have to do with Israel? Well, I'm getting there. I think every supporter of Israel needs to be reminded that the best defense is a strong offense. And after last week's circus at the UN, I for one am sick of Israel having to play defense. During Abbas and Netanyahu's speeches for the General Assembly, I hated the very fact that they were both being treated as moral equivalents. I hated watching Israel have to stand before this corrupt world body once again and defend its right to exist, defend the Jews' right to their historic homeland and own capital city. Why is Israel the only country that has to take the stand at the UN and justify its defense of her citizens? As Netanyahu pointed out in his speech, Israel has been singled out for condemnation at the UN more often than all the nations of the world combined. It's time for Israel to change the whole way this game is being played. It's time for Israel to go on offense and stop acting as if they're the only ones who have anything to lose. The UN is not the place to stage this new game. The starting point can no longer be just about Israeli concessions. A significant number of legislators in both the US Congress and Israel's Knesset took the PA's diplomatic charade as a wake-up call. They recognize now is the time to restructure America's policies towards the Palestinians. 2 bills were introduced in Congress last month that, if implemented, would punish the PA for their refusal to recognize Israel's right to exist. One of those bills called for the U.S. to halt all financial support of the Palestinian Authority. The other bill issued a resolution supporting Israeli annexation of parts of Judea and Samaria. That legislation was sponsored by Congressman Joe Walsh and signed by 30 others. Congress is not the only place where legislators are trying to put Israel back in the driver's seat. Now that Netanyahu has returned from New York, some Israeli Knesset members have a few offensive plays of their own. Some leaders in the Knesset are talking about sanctioning the PA and cutting off Israel's transfer of tax funds to the Palestinians. Israeli Finance Minister Yuval Steinitz says the government is closely considering this. I mean, if the PA wants to move forward unilaterally, then by all means, let them go on their own economically as well. Also last week in the Knesset, members representing 4 different parties presented Netanyahu with a letter asking him to consider annexation of parts of Judea and Samaria. The letter calls for gradual annexation of the areas where there is a Jewish majority. The annexation bill is supposed to come forward in the Knesset next month. But the idea is already gaining momentum both in the Knesset and in the Israeli population at large. Cutting off the PA's funding and proposing annexation may sound like radical ideas to most of the world. But most of the world had its opportunity last week to put Israel on the chopping block and was all for it. These bills are also completely doable. The PA can't function for a day without foreign funding and Israel's transfer of taxes. And as for annexation, Israel has done it before with the Golan and Jerusalem, and they can do it again. And in the meantime, Israel should build in Gilo, build in Ariel, and build some more. All Israel has ever gotten for her concessions are demands for more concessions. But sometimes aggression must be fought with aggression. If the Palestinians have abandoned the peace process, then Israel should too. And so what if the world disapproves of Israel's actions, which they have and will? As Netanyahu said in his speech at the UN, it's better to have bad press than a good eulogy. Shavua Tov.